Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on Sunday night, January the 18th, and welcome to our commentary. We're going to do our weekly conversation with George Rodriguez on Monday night. So we'll have that up tomorrow night. George was not able to join us today. We always enjoy chatting with George, of course, as much as we can because we're getting down to the primary. The primary here in March, or the primaries here in March, is here in Texas, is going to be, I believe, the first Tuesday in March. So it's coming up. I mean, there's less than 2 months, and you're already seeing candidates advertising, and it's going to be a tough contest on both sides. On the Democrat side, you have this gentleman Talarico, who has gone ahead of Jasmine Crockett in some of the polling data that has come out. She was ahead before, and now he's ahead. And my guess is that this may go back and forth a little bit. But one of the problems that Jasmine Crockett is having is connecting with Hispanic voters. So that's what her problem is, basically, among Democrats. Now, that could also be a problem in a general election, which would be, of course, an even bigger problem. But nevertheless, she's having a problem connecting with Hispanic voters on the Democrat side. And that's because of some things she has said before. So that's going to be a very contested race. I understand they're going to have a debate coming up. And in fact, next week, they're going to have a debate. So we'll see how it goes. Talarico is doing a very good job of presenting himself as the no politician or the non-politician. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. On the Republican side, it's going to very likely go to the runoff, and it's going to be Senator Cornyn versus Attorney General Paxton. It's going to go to the runoff because, well, I don't think either one's going to crack 50% the first time around. There is a third candidate, Wesley Hunt, who I think will probably keep both candidates from hitting 50. So that's why I think it's heading to a runoff, and that's going to get even more contested than the first primary. Now, there could also be a runoff on the Democrat side. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. So there's going to be a lot of politics going on here in Texas for about 4 months as we decide who the candidates are going to nominate to run for the U.S. Senate. So we'll talk about a lot of that with George the next time we get together with him. Well, this has been, of course, the weekend of the NFL playoff, and so far, I think the NFL has given us some pretty good games. But unfortunately, on Saturday night, the Buffalo-Denver game came down to a lot of controversial calls. And I'm not one of those who believes that a game is decided by a referee because, look, they play a whole game. And there's a lot of other things going on during the game that impacted the final result. So, you can't just say, well, because of this play, because of that play, or because of that call, or because of that call. I don't believe that is correct. But there's no question in my mind that there were a couple of calls that went against Buffalo there toward the end of the game that were, let's say, controversial. And I don't know what the NFL is going to do about that, but you cannot have that much controversy in a playoff game because, when fans are thinking that the ref was in the tank for the other team or something like that, that's not good. Now, I'm not saying that he was. Don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that the referee was wrong. It was a very close call. But still, two of them going against Buffalo at key points in the game, fans are going to get passionate and they're going to say some things. I just think it's a shame that they couldn't do a review of both of those plays. I understand that when it goes into overtime, they cannot do a review, or the coach cannot throw the flag and call for a review. I think that's a mistake. I mean, especially in overtime, there should be the opportunity for a review. So if you're listening to me in Buffalo, or if you're watching me in Buffalo, and I think we've got a friend up there, it's not pretty being a Buffalo Bill fan this morning because that was a very controversial ending to that game. So, but other than that, I think the NFL is doing a really good job of having they always put a good product on the field. That's the one thing the NFL has going for them. The game itself, they put a good product on the field time after time after time, and that's why I think they're so successful as a sports league, because when you watch a game, you're going to get generally you're going to get a good game in the post season. So we wish the rest of the teams a lot of luck as they head to the Final Four that will be happening next weekend. I have a post over at the American Thinker today, Sunday morning, talking about the irrational behavior coming from the anti-ICE protesters in Minneapolis. Now, as I've told you before, to me, the culprit of all this madness in Minneapolis is the local government that has not been confronting these protesters and has not been working with ICE. Things would be a heck of a lot easier in Minneapolis or in Minnesota, but Minneapolis specifically, if the local government was working with ICE. I think they would have a much easier time going through all of the arrests and all of these problems. And by acting the way they're acting, the local government is basically forcing ICE to have to go into neighborhoods or have to go into crowds and look for somebody. And I just think that's because of the way Minneapolis, the local police, or certainly the political class. I think the police would be happy to help and work with ICE, but their hands are tied. But I think that's the big problem right now in Minneapolis, that the local government is not working with ICE like they're supposed to. And I really hope that the federal government takes action against the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota for basically promoting this chaos with the lack of support for ICE. They don't, all they have to do when ICE says we're looking for this person, all they have to do is work with ICE to find that person. They can do it in a more discreet way. That way ICE doesn't have to come into neighborhoods and talk to people. But on the other hand, you have the mayor of Minneapolis, who's obviously trying to take advantage of this situation politically, going on TV and talking about people dragging people out of cars. Well, come on. That's a little exaggerated as well. Okay, so come on, everybody's got to control their emotions a little bit here. Well, there's a lot of talk about Greenland. I think a lot of it is just hype. We're not going to be invading Greenland anytime, and I think what everybody's got to understand is that Greenland is a very strategic position for the West, and we have to be the ones, meaning the West, the United States. We're the ones that have to have advantage there. Because if we let the Chinese have advantage in Greenland, it's going to come back to haunt us down the road. So some of these NATO countries are reacting a little silly. They're even talking about sending troops to Greenland. I mean, that's kind of silly. That's kind of silly on their part as well. So everybody needs to come down a little bit and understand the vision that Trump has here. His vision is, hey, that's a very strategic piece of real estate, and the West should be running it. The West should control it, not our adversaries. And I think that's what's motivating Trump here. But we're not going to invade Greenland. I mean, that's not going to happen. My guess is that they'll resolve it somehow between Greenland and the Netherlands. I guess that's the colonial power there, and they'll figure something out, and things will move on as they always do. I've got a post coming out Monday morning about what's happening in Mexico. You may have heard that the Mexican government is under a lot of pressure from the Trump administration to do more, and they should do more. I mean, they're doing quite a bit. To be fair, they're doing quite a bit. And what the Trump administration is saying, hey, look, let us help you fight these cartels. We'll help. We'll work with you. The Trump administration is not talking about invading Mexico or sending the Marines. That's not what they're talking about. Mexico, I think right now, and that's what my post is all about, there's a divide, I believe, in Mexico between the politicians, particularly the party in power, who are basically repeating an ideology. And the ideology is sovereignty and no, we're opposed to an intervention, foreign intervention, that kind of thing. But that's basically ideology. That doesn't fix the problems that Mexico has. And this is where I think the divide is coming in. Because I think a lot of Mexicans, particularly those who live in the interior of the country and many of these small towns, on one hand, they're hearing all this ideology about foreign intervention, but then on the other hand, they're seeing their mayor get killed. They're seeing extortion. They're seeing sometimes journalists get killed. I mean, being a journalist in Mexico has been pretty dangerous lately. So you have this situation where I think you're seeing this divide, and who's going to prevail? I'm not sure. But I think it would be wise for the Mexican government to basically sit down with the American government and say, look, let's do some joint operations. I mean, you put the Mexican soldiers in front. They're the ones who are going to be knocking doors and looking for bad guys, and we do support. And I think that's the best way to do it, because the current situation cannot continue. The current situation, the levels of violence and extortion and that kind of thing cannot continue. And I think most Mexicans realize that, and they would like to do something about it. Well, speaking of football, on this day in 1976, that's 50 years ago. Hard to believe, but 50 years ago. My gosh, where does the time go? The Cowboys and the Steelers were in Super Bowl number 10. And that was a pretty good game, great game between the Steelers and the Cowboys. The Steelers ended up winning 21-17. That was the game where, the Steelers made these unbelievable catches and went on to score touchdowns. But it was a great game. It was the first, though, of the two meetings between the Steelers and the Cowboys. They met again in Super Bowl 13, and that was an even greater game. That was one of the greatest games in Super Bowl history, Super Bowl number 13. But, it became a really big game in the 70s. It wasn't at the very beginning, as I mentioned the other day, when I was going back to remember the first Super Bowl. It wasn't a big game at the beginning, but it became the number one sports event really in the 70s. And the Cowboys and the Steelers had a lot to do with that, because they were great teams with very passionate fans, with great coaches. And those two teams, the Steelers and the Cowboys, and there were others too, the Raiders, the Dolphins, they were also great teams. But it was the Steelers and the Cowboys who sort of dominated the decade. And they're the ones who I think made the Super Bowl what it became, the number one sporting event in the United States. And I mean, there's nothing that comes close to it. The levels of audience, the levels of interest, nothing comes close to the Super Bowl. I mean, the World Series, the baseball World Series used to be number one for a long time, but that is at best number two. At best, number two, and by a long shot. I mean, the Super Bowl is number one by a long shot. No question about it. Super Bowl has become the number one sporting event in the United States. And one of the great games was 50 years ago between the Cowboys and the Steelers. Thank you for listening. I hope your team is winning. Bad news for our friends in Houston. The Texans were defeated up in New England. I thought the Texans did not play well, but that happens when you play these games. But again, going back to that Buffalo game, that was you don't want to see that much controversy. You don't want to see referees being controversial in these great games, because most of the time the referees are excellent. They're very good. I would say 99% of the time they're excellent. So you don't want to see them. You don't want to see them engaging in this kind of controversy. It's not good for the game, and not good for the fans or anybody. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later.